Okay, good morning. Thank you. Thanks, Bob, for your introduction to the topic of this conference. Coming of age is in different ways an appropriate title, I think. First of all, for our personal aging, I guess. We have been in this business, if you like to use that term, for more than 25 years, I think. And it's really a pleasure to see how this concept has been now becoming more and more mainstream, not only in science, but also in policy and also increasingly in practice. But thinking of the title, I thought that actually ESP as an organization is still very young. We only exist about 5 years now. The idea for the partnership was brought forward by Bob and Ida at a meeting in Kiel, Germany, organized by Felix Müller and Benjamin Burkhardt, looking for problems, or maybe not looking for problems, but discussing problems and challenges in relation to the concept of ecosystem services. A year later we got together in the south of Italy, focusing on instruments, how to analyze those problems, and modeling is an important one there. But at that meeting it was confirmed that we really should go ahead with this partnership, and we established kind of an informal provisional steering committee to make it happen. So actually the birth of ESP happened when we went back to Salzau in 2010, looking for solutions. And there we officially launched the partnership, and then it really took off last year in Wageningen in the Netherlands, where we had more than double the number of people we expected. We counted on about 120, 130 participants, but we got over 250 people coming. It was a very stimulating conference, looking for linkages between science and practice. So here we are now in Portland with more than, I think, 350 participants taking part, also expanding the partnership to include organizations like ACES and IALE, which I think is very important to build these bridges between those various communities. We have now more than 200 registered ESP. We call them website users. They're not all really members yet, but they are registered on our website to think along with what we are trying to achieve, and 50 institutional members. So we're really getting a voice slowly and starting to be heard with our message. But at this same point I would like to emphasize that it's not so much the real numbers and the amount of noise that we make, but also the quality and the engagement of the community within ESP in our communication to the outside world. And I'm really impressed and very encouraged by the enormous response we got to some of the messages we have been sending around before this conference, to become active in working groups that we created within the partnership to focus on certain issues that we should be looking at. I hope you all recognize this screenshot from the homepage of our renewed website, where you can find 3 main types of activities that are really carried by the membership itself. We call them thematic working groups, focusing on issues like valuation and trade-off analysis, modeling, and all those other more thematic issues we should be looking into in more detail. And then we have, for the moment, 14 what we call biome expert groups to focus on issues related to tropical forests, savannas, all kinds of main ecosystem types. And a growing network of national partnerships and regional chapters. And there are many suggestions to further develop that, which will actually be the topic of a session tomorrow. One of the working groups will be focusing on this networking issue. Now, I shouldn't be unfair here to make advertising for my own cause, which I will not do. But I should warn you that if you look in the program, the original title was to focus on establishing a network of case studies, showcases, where we really work in the field with scientists and local people. but that has been expanded now to discuss all those different working groups in a few blocks to really see where we are and where we want to go. So if you are involved in some of those working groups, feel free to pass by, and we have quite a list of short presentations there. So that was just a warning that you don't have false expectations if you come to that meeting. But go to other sessions by all means. Then we have some core, what we call ecosystems partnership services. There should be long-term topics that we will facilitate through the partnership itself, through the secretariats and the steering committee members. I will just highlight a few of them. Of course, our main aim is to provide a platform for communication and collaboration among existing organizations and networks. And we really want to be an open platform, all kinds of disciplines and visions on what you can and what you cannot or should not do with ecosystem services are very welcome to engage and to discuss the way forward. This is something that is kind of a little dream of myself, I guess. I hope over the years we will continue to establish these case study sites and learning sites where we really work together with local communities, local decision makers and scientists. And this is a project started by some of my former students at Wageningen University, who in 2007 went to South Africa, the Baviaanskloof area, a very dry type of ecosystem that had been overgrazed by goats and other livestock, and they're working there with the local community to restore the area using this concept of ecosystem services. And along the way they managed to engage many local decision makers and stakeholders, and they got a little village even, a couple of houses and a place where they can receive students and scientists. And just last year they built this little hut where they are teaching the local school children about ecosystem services and how to use their environment in a more sustainable way. And I think that's a beautiful example of what I would like to see the partnership help to stimulate, to develop these centers of research and learning. And just recently I've established contact with a project in called Iwo Grama, Indiana, that exists already for quite some time, I think 10, 15 years or maybe even longer. And I hope you can lead the mission that they have to be a model for demonstrating that tropical forests are worth more alive than dead. That's the way how they formulated it. And I hope they will also become part of the ESP family. And through those biome ecosystem expert groups, I hope we can establish these kind of centers in all the main types of ecosystems to work in more detail on those topics. And of course we're not the only ones thinking about this. There are lots of other networks out there that try to work with local communities, the IUCN, the SDA, Subglobal Assessment Network. That's I think also a very important initiative coming out of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. We have over 60 subglobal assessments around the world. There is a special working group on that later this week. If you have a look at our website, you will find many more of these local initiatives. We're collecting a lot of data, of course, and we want to share that data and knowledge. Within the context of the TEEP project that finished in 2010, we set up a database with more than 1,350 value points, and we are now discussing with an organization called Earth Economics, based in Tacoma, not far from here, who are working on a very unique project called SERVS, a simple and effective resource for valuing ecosystem services, if I say it offhand correctly. But we have been thinking about skipping the S, because it's not very simple. It's quite a complex system. There are a lot of good people working on it from Amazon and Microsoft and T-Mobile. I think some people that really should know what they are doing to create an interface on the web for people to enter data in that database and also get it out again. Dave Betka, director of Earth Economics, is with us, so if you sitting up front here, want to talk about this, see him about this initiative. But there is also again a working group on this later this week. Bob already mentioned the new journal Elsevier. They came to talk to us actually last time at Salzal conference in Germany when we established the partnership to to see if there would be a need for a journal like this, and quite surprisingly, in spite of all the publications Bob showed, there are no journals out there with ecosystem services in the title. Many people are publishing on it in ecological economics and other journals, but not the main focus or the main entry into the topic is not ecosystem services, but another discipline. So they did a global survey, and it turned out that there was a lot of support for having a new journal like this. I also mentioned a journal, which you cannot read the title of, but it's Biodiversity Science, Ecosystem Services and Management from Taylor and Francis, which I have become the editor-in-chief of 3 or 4 years ago, and I squeezed in the title, Ecosystem Services. It used to be called Biodiversity Science and Management before, but when I became editor-in-chief, I thought this is a good opportunity to put ecosystem services on the map. So those two journals are actually quite complementary. The last one is more focusing on the natural science side, how to link biodiversity science management, and the other one is more focused at the policy and the institutional part of the issue. Of course, both topics need to be linked, so you can submit papers on all these topics to those journals. Bob Costanza has a journal himself called Solutions, which is also on the display out there. And another member of the steering committee, Felix Muller, is editor-in-chief of Ecological Indicators. So within the partnership, we have a whole bunch of good people that can help you publish the output of your work. Then from the last conference in Wageningen, just before the conference, I was approached by a person called Meindert Brouwer, a Dutch publisher or writer. If I know people who he could approach to talk about the importance of ecosystems. I said, well, I know a good bunch of people that are coming to Wageningen in October. So we came to the conference and spoke to a lot of people and produced in 9 months' time a really nice book called The Ecosystem Promise. And as a member of ESP, you can get reduced subscriptions to these journals and to this book if you like. Then, all this knowledge should somehow also be further given onward to future generations and other communities. So last time in Wageningen we had a summer school linked to the conference to PhD students to learn more about integrated assessment of ecosystem services. There's an initiative called NECRES. I think it's a terrible acronym actually. But it stands for a Network for Early Career Researchers of Ecosystem Services. So it makes some sense, but it sounds a bit morbid almost. Actually, when I started talking to them, if they didn't think it would be a good idea to join ESP to create a group of young ecosystem service scientists, I thought, yes, sounds much nicer as an acronym. We were still talking about it. And Rebecca Kos is running this group. I don't know quite what she's doing over there in that, I don't know what it is, algae or something, in an ocean environment. She works at Liverpool University. Then all this should hopefully lead to some consistency in the way how we do these kind of assessments and valuations and put them into practice. And I think a very good step in that direction was published last year by Cambridge University and BirdLife International, together with UNEP WCMC. They produced this booklet called Measuring and Monitoring Ecosystem Services at the Site Scale, so working towards a toolkit that can be used in local and national assessments and hopefully also help the recently established IPBS to not start from scratch but pick up on what has been done so far. And again, ESP, I think, is the perfect organization to test these toolkits, to apply them in case study contexts and further improve them. And we had a special workshop on this at one of the conferences that Bob did not mention yet. 2012 seems to be the year for all kinds of events, also in relationship to ecosystem services. The IUCN has their World Conservation Congress. They organize it every 4 or 5 years. In September in South Korea, and we have a special workshop on this topic, on the development of toolkits and guidelines. So finally, how are we organizing all this? I mentioned earlier we have quite an informal setup so far, but we do have to become more serious about this as the partnership is growing and our voice is getting louder. We are getting older, so we have both full members and core partners, as we call them. They are both institutional members and individual members that are paying or provide support in kind to the partnership. The idea is to make them part of a big governing board or some other term we have to think about. Then we should elect officially a steering committee from the whole community of ESP members. It's something we will explain in more detail at the member meeting later this week. The executive committee now consists of people that started the whole thing a few years ago. Myself and Sander van der Ploeg in Wageningen University, Bob and Ida, you met already, Felix and Benjamin. Benjamin is here, Felix unfortunately could not join us. Roy and Marion from the University of Nottingham, they are both here. And the people from Italy could not join us. And of course, you yourself are the ones doing the real work in those working groups and experts groups and going out there and doing the science and practice. And we want to work together with you as much as possible. And we will discuss this in a bit more detail on Friday. Finally, my last slide, a few more challenges, or the same actually that have been mentioned before, like yesterday's policy session on questions about frameworks and definitions. Maybe surprisingly, after all those years, we still didn't agree upon a final definition of ecosystem services and functions and frameworks, how to quantify and value them. Something that is being asked to me more and more recently is if the concept of ecosystem services is not replacing the conservation paradigm. I think if it is, then it is a matter of interpretation, not a matter of the concept itself. I think something to discuss in this meeting. No time to go in detail now. So the overall, I think, question is how to link science to practice for a more sustainable world, and for that we need all those different angles and communication. Something encouraging is that the business community is more and more discovering the usefulness of the concept of ecosystem services. An organization called Businesses for Social Responsibility exists already 20 or 30 years, and almost 300 companies signed up to them. Most of the big international companies included, like Shell and Unilever and IKEA and all those companies, at least talk to each other about how to make a little bit more sustainable world. And they recently created a working group on ecosystem services. And they claim that concept is helping to restore 187,000 hectares of wasteland every year. Sounds like a lot, but I think we are losing more than that every year still by deforestation and other non-sustainable actions, but still it's going in the right direction. But it's up to you and me and all of us to show that this concept of ecosystem services really helps to bring about conservation and sustainable development. That's something you will be talking about later this week in 40 or so working groups and many interesting talks. And finally, I think the first keynote speaker after me is Hal Mooney, and I cannot think of a better person actually to start talking about how to make this link with policy making. Hal was one of the driving forces behind the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, and now also one of the main persons trying to make IPBS happen. I'm sure, Bob, you will introduce Hal more officially, but I think except for all his visionary work, it's also one of the most amiable, in good English, persons I know, always stays patient in spite of all the delay in trying to make this world a better place. That's all for me. I'm really pleased to see so many of you and looking forward to a very interesting meeting, and I hope to be able to talk to most of you in person.